This is one of the problems that I have. I mean, we're both dads. These apps have been specifically designed to hook and keep children online for as long as possible.
That's right.
Mindless scrolling. And during that scrolling, they have content that is pushed to them, content that they wouldn't otherwise go looking for, to keep them online for longer. And some of that content ends up suggesting suicide.
That's right.
So how do we fix this at the source?
Hello, how are you? Welcome to my channel. My name is Cheer Denise. Today we're going to talk about Prince Harry's interview with Jonathan Haidt on World Mental Health Day regarding Jonathan Haidt's book, An Anxious Generation. The conversation was really interesting to me because Harry, in our last conversation that we had seen, the last interview he had done, he had expressed this great concern that there was just nothing you could do, that the world is just going to prey on your kid, and that, in previous generations, we all thought that our children were safe under our own roof, but then you turn around now, and 24 hours after they get on the phone, they're dead. And I remember thinking, that's not always how it has to be. And that can't happen in any home, because he kept saying it could happen to anyone. It could happen to anyone. And I said, well, it couldn't just happen to anyone, because as a parent, you have a responsibility to guard your children against things that you know would wreck their lives. So the whole point of this interview, Jonathan Haidt was talking about the fact that social media and smartphones are devastating this generation, and that the millennials had hit puberty before smartphones became a thing. Flip phones, yes, people had flip phones. You could text, you could call your friends. But this idea that you have a device in your pocket, this supercomputer that connects you to everyone in the world, wasn't a thing. And social media and scrolling and watching little videos for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours on TikTok wasn't a thing. What you're seeing with the next generation is an increased anxiety, and we see that ratcheting up right with the technology of smartphones. And that kids who have been fed a steady diet of social media and who have been allowed to be on their phones without any restrictions are mentally damaged, are emotionally damaged, don't have strong friendships, are physically unwell because they're sitting there with a screen in front of their face all day long instead of going out and doing things. And so the conversation was focused on, okay, we know now what phones and social media are doing. What are we going to do about that? How are we as communities going to change the trajectory for our children? What can we do when our child is pushing against us because all their friends have phones and they want one and you don't want them to have one? Why would we allow our children to have phones when the creators of these platforms in Silicon Valley don't even let their children have phones and get on social media? So it was a really interesting conversation. And if you have any interest whatsoever in the topic of phones and social media and the care we need to take that our children do not become involved in that at too early an age, certainly while they're developing and during puberty, it's a great conversation. And I agree with almost everything Jonathan Haidt says, except for the fact that I think that too much blame is placed on platforms that we as parents just need to exercise from our life. We don't need to say, oh, that platform is coming into my life. That platform is informing my child. We are all at the mercy of, we are all the victims of these social media platforms. You're not if you don't let it in your home. So Harry's assertion in the last interview that he did, that there's just no hope and that we just don't have any control and that it's just the world spinning out of our control, was a thing he tried to push forward again. Again, he tried to say it's the social media companies, because what Harry wants is censorship. What I think is that there should be limits placed on this social media for children. Certainly in China, they're over there turning off the social media for kids past 10. You're not allowed to get on it. It just shuts down. You're not looking at it. And the things that they're feeding into their algorithm aren't these stupid, wonky waste of time videos, but things about science and engineering and, athletics and they're things that if the kid is watching social media, it's more positive, and then there's a cutoff time. I'm not saying we need to be like China, but what I'm saying is it's very clear that here in America, it's all just a diet of sugar on our plates and sugar on our screens, right? And there's no limits, no holds barred, just indulge. So for Harry to say that he thinks that there needs to be some censorship, to a certain degree, I agree. And what that's called is having parents. Your parents are the ones who make sure that they are cultivating a life for you that does not involve you sitting there wasting away with a phone in your hand. And so Harry says to Jonathan Haidt, don't you think this is the fault of the companies? Don't you think that we have to do something about that? And while I agree with almost everything that Jonathan Haidt says in this interview, I still think that he gives too much power to these companies. To me, being a parent means having to be the bad guy sometimes and saying, no, you can't have a phone. No, I'm sorry that it makes you upset and that, all your friends have one. By the end of the interview, they're talking about different ways in which you can help your child cope by not having a phone, though their friends do. And so he's talking about, making sure you're in groups of like-minded people, making sure your kids are in a no-phone school and all these sorts of things, which to me is like, yes, of course that's what you would do. I just don't even understand giving into your kids because they are sad because everybody else is doing it. Wasn't our whole life our parents being like, well, if everyone else is jumping off a bridge, are you doing that too? It's like, how many times were we coached by our parents to stand up against peer pressure? And now we as parents are all acting like, well, it's out of my hands. They wanted one. Is it out of your hands? How? How is it out of your hands? Are you not the one that just paid $1,000 for a brand new iPhone for your child who doesn't need it? Are you not the one who just handed the drug to your kid and was like, now why are you addicted? But I think ultimately the problem is that so many parents are also addicted to their phones that if they suddenly say, well, you can't have a phone, it's addicting. As they go back and look at theirs, they don't want to be a hypocrite and they also don't want to deal with their own addiction. So they just hand out phones to everybody in the family. The problem is not the social media companies. The problem is that the parents are as lazy as the children when it comes to wanting to change the trajectory of their lives. And I say this as a person who thinks they're also addicted to their phone. I think I'm looking at my phone way too much. But it's got to stop somewhere. You can't let your child in on the same problem you're having. You got to deal with your problem, but don't let them in on it. The bad parents, who drink with their kids or do drugs with their kids, like the Ted Kennedys of the world. Everyone is up in arms, that's terrible parenting. But isn't the whole world involved in that when they hand their child a phone, the very device that they themselves as the parents can't get off of? And Harry's over here acting like, well, there's just nothing you can do. There is, though. And I think that Jonathan Haidt should have pushed back a little bit more on that, except he thinks that these big bad social media companies really are putting this sort of inexplicable pressure on you that you can't say no to. And I just don't agree with that. Ironically, Jonathan Haidt then later talks about the fact that there's all these studies that have been done that show that when you take children off of social media, that they do so much better. That, at first, there is this withdrawal period that happens. And then if you can just get through the withdrawal symptoms and 3 weeks down the road, they're not on social media, they're not on their phones, they're so much happier. And by every measurable metric, their lives have improved by being off the phone. And they're happier and report to be happier. They will self-report without anybody asking how Instagram is affecting their lives. And they say, it makes me depressed. I'm depressed to see these perfect lives that I can't attain to. I'm depressed to see these perfect bodies that I know I can never have. It's all filters. It's all silliness. It's all just Instagram magic that makes all this stuff look so perfect. It's all these snapshots of everybody's highlight reels. It's not real. And these poor developing children who don't know any better and who are being fed a steady diet of perfection, but know that they themselves are not, are just feeling like they never will measure up. So they're self-reporting that these platforms are hurting them. And they know that when they get off of them, they feel better. And yet Harry's over here acting as though yeah, but the platforms are still a problem. They are a problem, but don't do it. It's like saying, well, when I smoke cigarettes, I can't breathe. And it's just really hard for me. I don't feel well. And I can't run. I can't climb up the stairs without huffing and puffing. Those damn cigarette companies. It's just their fault. Well, but you started smoking, didn't you? You go out and you buy your cigarettes every day. How in the world can you act as though this company has any right to tell you what to do? And the same thing for me. In my mind, it's the social media companies. How in the world are all of these companies involved in my life if I don't open the door to them? How can I blame these companies? And so Harry, by the end of the interview, was saying, well, it sounds to me like what we need to do is really stand up to these companies. Yeah, you don't say. But because you can't rely on a mass of people suddenly deciding to rise up and do something about this, although I do think there is a wave towards that. And there are more and more schools that are saying no phones. And there's more and more parent groups who are deciding, actually, we aren't giving our kids phones. And y'all with me? And everyone's like, yes, we're with you. There's more and more of that happening. So I think that there is a wave towards change. But for Harry to act as though the only way for this to stop is for us all to collectively figure out that we all have the same opinion, I just don't know that there's that many parents out there that want to fight it. I think you can find pockets of people, and that I feel like is your job as a parent, to find the pocket of people who see it the way you see it and to raise your kids accordingly. But why are we putting so much power in the hands of the social media companies? Why don't we just say, I'm not playing your game? I'm not doing it. I don't have to. I don't have to do anything I don't want to do. And I don't want my kids addicted to phones. So I'm not doing it. And I'm sorry if they're sad about it. Go outside and build a fire. Go climb a tree. Play with the dog. Let's do some crafts. Right? Like, we can do other things. We don't need to be on a phone. We don't need to have somebody always entertaining us. It is so powerful to be able to entertain yourself. It is so powerful to be able to sit down and read a chapter of a book without thinking, I've got to check my phone and see if there's any reels I haven't seen yet. We are the ones who empower our children, and Harry just doesn't believe that. Harry is a perpetual victim. And as I stated to some length in a previous video, Harry's victim mentality will always be the thing that holds him back because he does not believe in agency. And this was just another platform that exposed the fact that he thinks he is a victim to society's worst ills. But wake up, Harry. You're a human being. You're still breathing. You're still functioning. That means you still get to decide what happens to you today to a certain degree. And your children, if they exist, don't have to be addicted to social media. Pure and simple. It's your choice. How do you want to parent? You make the decision. Nobody's going to make you do anything you don't want to do. Unless it's Megan. Maybe get her out of your life. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.